friends, and welcome to another video. My name is Miley. If you're new here, thank you so much for subscribing and liking this video right now because it really helps me out. Okay, so today I'm so excited to bring you the third video in my definitive ranking and review book series. As you know from my previous videos where I ranked Outlander and the Bridgerton series, I love a good romance. And today's series is no different. I love this book series. I literally just finished it yesterday. I finished the fourth book in this series yesterday. And I can't wait to sit down and talk about it with you guys and let you know my ranking. So stick around to the end to hear which one I like best and which one I like least, and see if you agree or disagree, and definitely let me know in the comments below. So without further ado, let's jump into today's video where we are doing a definitive ranking and review of the All Souls series, or probably more popularly known, A Discovery of Witches. So I have not known about this series for long. In fact, I probably saw an advertisement for the AMC TV show on my Roku main page on my television in my bedroom, which, by the way, I'm in my new redecorated master bedroom. I'll link that video up here in case you missed it, so you can see the full room transformation. But I saw an ad for A Discovery of Witches, which is a TV show based on the All Souls series on AMC, and it stars Matthew Goode, who is I love Matthew Goode. I love anything he's in. He just, every time I see him in a show, I'm like, yes, I love you. I think he's such a good actor. I think he's so pretty to look at. I just love him. So I saw this intriguing ad and saw he was in it and thought, oh, I've never even heard of this. What is this A Discovery of Witches thing? Because the TV series is called A Discovery of Witches, even though the series of books is called All Souls. The first book is called A Discovery of Witches, you know. So I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a series on AMC, but it's also based on a book. And what do I have to do when I realize a TV show is based on a book? I have to read the book first before I watch the TV show, because that's just the kind of human I am, you know? So I was like, okay, I'll buy these books. I'll give them a chance. We'll see. So I started the series and ended up absolutely loving it, finishing it in about a month. And I'm here to talk to you all about it. So the first book is great. I love the first book. The first book is called A Discovery of Witches. And it sets up the story of Diana, who is a witch living in the normal human world. And she is kind of afraid of her powers and denying who she is as a witch. She thinks she's better off trying to just be a human, not using her magic, not worrying about it. But as we discover throughout the series, there's a lot more going on with her under the surface that is in her control and out of her control that we discover through the series. So we meet her. She's a scholar. She is researching at Oxford on some sort of study thing. I don't know. And she goes to the library and pulls a manuscript, and the manuscript that comes to her is apparently some long lost magical manuscript that explains the origin stories of all mankind: humans, witches, and then the two other types of creatures, demons and vampires. We love a good vampire tale, don't we? So once she accidentally discovers this book, all the other witches and demons and vampires kind of take notice, and they, I guess, observe her and want to know how the heck she got the book, because it had been lost for literally a long time. And probably the person that wanted it the most was a vampire named Matthew. I love Matthew so much. And he wants it because he thinks it explains the origin of vampires and why they're dying out. It's actually a really convoluted plot. The plot is very intricate, detailed, intense. So basically, Matthew gets closer to Diana. They develop a kind of friendship, and it becomes clearer and clearer day by day that this manuscript has some consequences that have come with it that she doesn't understand, and demons and witches and vampires are all kind of after her, and she does not have the means to protect herself. And so Matthew, through desire to have the book and learn more about it, and also his weird feelings and relationship with Diana, he decides he's going to protect her. So they quickly turn into a romance where he's protecting her and helps her kind of figure out who she is, what the book is, figure out her life, and put together the pieces of her past. And you also at the same time hear his story about becoming a vampire and all of the nuances and complications that came with that, his backstory. It's really detailed. Like, it is a convoluted plot, that's for sure. There's a lot happening, a lot going on. But I love it, and it's fabulous. And by the end of the first book, they are totally in love, basically married. Okay, so here are my thoughts on the first book. The first 60 pages, literally I read it and I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Did I literally miss something? Like, did I skip 20 pages of explanation? Like, it just throws you right in and it does not explain anything that's happening. You kind of just have to figure it out as it goes on, and it definitely becomes clearer. But the first 60 pages, I was like, what am I reading? What is this? I don't understand. But then it slowly got better and better and better. And then by the time you hit the real romance and the real like story of it, you love it and you like read it like crazy because you want to know what happens. But it is a slow start. So keep that in mind if you've never read this series and are wanting to start it. You do kind of have to get past the first little bit to really understand what you're reading and why it's worthwhile. The first book is the most straightforward. All of the stories are pretty darn dense, but this one's fairly easy to follow, and the characters are introduced. There's a lot of character setup. I love all the characters. I will say the characters aren't super dimensional. They aren't super undimensional either, so make of that what you will. But there do tend to be certain archetypes of characters, and that doesn't keep you from loving them whatsoever. I love all the characters that I'm supposed to love, at least, but they aren't the most evolved characters in the world. And also, I will say about the romance, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief, okay? It happens really quickly, and it's really intense, like lots of like love declarations and just like really cheesy language. Now, I freaking love that. I'm all about that. I love a good juicy romance. But I would say that compared to Outlander, for example, Outlander's romance is always rooted in the story, in the characters. It ties back to them. It's very realistic. It's actually things people would say in real life. This dialogue, I can't say the same for. There are at least moments. Now, most of the book is really well written and dynamic and fabulous, but the specific romance scenes can get a little bit indulgent. I'll just say that. Compared to Bridgerton, on the other hand, they're a lot less true, cheesy, silly romance. So take it for what you will, but I love it. So once you get past the setup of this book, following through the plot and reaching the climax, figuring out what happens, that's all super awesome. The story's very compelling. It keeps you turning the page. It's a really good introductory book, definitely. So then we have the second book, and the second book is called Shadow of Night, maybe? Shadow of Darkness? Honestly, I don't remember. I read these books pretty fast, okay? I think it's called Shadow of Night, pretty sure. But it takes place mostly in like Shakespearean London. So I like to joke that this book is like Twilight meets Outlander. Like, you have the vampire romance, forbidden love element, and then you also like time travel them and put them in Shakespearean times. It's like Outlander. It cracks me up. I don't know if that's what the author was going for, but she hit the nail on the head if it is, because it was half Outlander, half Twilight. So essentially, because of Matthew and Diana's love, they have broken a covenant set by basically a jury of demons and witches and vampires that say that you can't have interspecies mingling. And so by choosing to love each other and mating with each other, they have broken that covenant and basically can be reprimanded by this council or jury or whatever. So in order to, number one, get away from that consequence, and number two, to find out more about the Book of Life and keep Diana safe, because at this point, everybody's going after her, they decide to, what they call time walk, which is a special skill that Diana has. They time walk back to Shakespearean London, and so begins an extremely intricate plot that sometimes I could not follow very well. So they go back in time and they live their life in London in Shakespearean times. They meet some historical figures from that era. I love that. And Diana gets to see what Matthew's life was like back then. and meet all the people that lived back then. And it gets kind of, you have to forgive a lot when you're reading it because it seems like it's a little too convenient. Like it seems like they've gone back in time. They're around all the same people that Matthew had been around in that same time period. They all know that he's from the future. And so they have to come up with this narrative to not reveal that his past, not reveal to his past self that he came. You don't even understand my description of it because I can't describe it very well because that's how convoluted it is. But you just kind of have to, like I said earlier, suspend your disbelief and just go with it. Have it easily explained away and just take it at face value for what it is. So this book was interesting because I felt like it's kind of getting away from the plot. Like they went back in time so that Diana could learn to hone her magic and study with great witches to be able to return to their time and deal with the book situation and move on with their lives. But it just seemed like they were getting distracted from that mission at every turn. And the book was kind of doing that on purpose because it kept calling it out that they were getting distracted from their mission, but it just kind of made it frustrating to read because it was like, okay, so you're acknowledging that you've missed the plot, like get back on the plot here. But I think it was just, you know, adding complication and adding intrigue and adding conflict for the sake of making a good story. So I get that. But it did feel a little frustrating to read in that middle part of the book where they're in the past and getting distracted from all the things that they should be doing. And they end up staying in the past a lot longer than they anticipated. They pick up Sweet Jack, who's one of my favorite characters. A lot of good characters are introduced. Phoebe's introduced in this book, I think. Marcus's love. Is Phoebe in this book? Or is she in Discovery of Witches? I don't know. Like I said, I read them pretty fast. They ran together. Let me know down below if you know. When did Phoebe get introduced? Second book or first book? I don't know, but I love Phoebe too. So there's some good character development. Gallowglass! Do we get Gallowglass in the second one too? If so, I love Gallowglass. If you love Gallowglass, then you get it. But I think we meet him in this book. So there's a lot of good in this book, don't get me wrong. But it is a bit too complicated for its own good, I would say. Kind of gets a little muddled and messy. So then we have the third book. The third book is called The Book of Life. So it's basically where they wrap up the Book of Life. They determine that the Book of Life is literally made from the skin of creatures like vampires and demons and witches. And it's basically their origin story, all of them. And honestly, I don't fully understand what the Book of Life is and what it has to offer. That whole part of the story, I was just kind of like, I don't really care that much about this as I do the characters and what's actually going on with the rest of the plot. But in the third book, we wrap up that storyline finally. They come back, Diana's pregnant. They are like, we didn't know vampires could impregnate witches. They have to figure out why the heck they were able to. They go to Yale and Diana's best friend Chris gathers a research team and does a project around testing DNA of demons, witches, and vampires to kind of determine what research they can find about it and tie that back to the Book of Life. It's very complicated. It's very complicated to like give a brief synopsis of because it's complicated and a lot happens in this book. I would say more happens in this book than even the first or second book. This is probably the most busy plot line, but I think that works in its favor because it doesn't have time to get as convoluted in certain sections of the plot. It moves a lot quicker and just more exciting things are happening and going on. Diana has her twins and we get the sentiment of learning their names and connecting them to those that helped them on their journey. We get lots of humor in this one. I really appreciated. We get a little bit more about Marcus and Phoebe and their love story. I love this book because a lot of the questions are answered. You get everything tied up in a nice, pretty bow in kind of unexpected, cool ways. And it's just a really, really good series finale. Like, it's a great finisher. You know how sometimes you can read a book series and it just doesn't get better than the first book? This book series is not like that at all. I would say the second book, although a little bit exhausting to read, like I mentioned before, it's still a really great book. And then the third book, man, you just fly through that thing because it has such a great way of introducing new story elements, like the villain, like kind of the big bad villain of the whole thing comes to fruition in the third book and gets taken care of. But you also wrap up so many different storylines. So many questions that had been unanswered in the first two books are totally answered in the third one. It's just a great, great finisher to the series. But then we have the fourth book, which LOL to the fourth book. I just finished it, and I honestly hope we're gonna get more books like this. So the fourth book was very much like an epilogue style book. It focuses mainly on Marcus and Phoebe's relationship and Phoebe's decision to become a vampire. So the whole book is set after the Book of Life is complete and we've moved into the future a little bit. Phoebe has just become a vampire, and according to old vampire law or whatever, she has to be split from her mate for 90 days or something, Marcus being her mate, and then they come back together and she has to choose him of her own volition or whatever. So it's a dual story. You're told in a couple chapters at a time Phoebe's story and what it's like for her becoming a new vampire and all the challenges and struggles and new things she experiences because of that. And then it's also told a couple chapters at a time about Marcus and where he is in present day with Diana, with Matthew. You get their continued story a little bit. Kind of you see into their, like, what it's like at home in a normal day with them and the twins. And you get kind of the complications of raising the twins. And then you also get a third element told a couple chapters at a time about Marcus's past before he became a vampire, leading up to how he became a vampire. So you see kind of an epilogue story of what happens after the Book of Life, but then you also have Phoebe becoming a new vampire in present day and learning in past about how Marcus became a vampire. So it's a really great read. I really enjoyed it. I always love epilogue structured stories. I love knowing that the characters live on after the story that you're reading about and whatever book you're reading is over. It was a nice like breath of fresh air, especially after reading the first three, trilogy books of the All Souls series that are really complicated and convoluted and intense. This was a nice breath of fresh air. Just learn about the characters. It was a very character development driven story, and I loved that. So that's the fourth book. I loved it. I count it as part of the All Souls series, and I hope they make more kind of anthology type books about the different characters and what happened to them after the fact. I love a full Isabeau backstory book for sure. I love Isabeau so much. So now that I've kind of talked about each of the four books, let me give you my ranking. And don't forget, before we get to that, to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. And please like this video if you want to see more videos like it. Let me know down below what series I should read and review next. And now, let's get to my rankings. So, in fourth place is my least favorite book of the series. I don't think it's going to come to a surprise based on how I've spoken about it. It's number 2. I like number 2, but I could do without it. It's not my fave. Yeah, it's not my fave. So the next book in my ranking, I'm probably going to put in third place, book number 4. I really loved it. I loved the story of Marcus and Phoebe and kind of the epilogue of Diana and Matthew. But I'm going to put it in third place because I think I like the other two a little bit better. So in second place, I would say is the first book. I loved A Discovery of Witches. Such a great introduction, such a great setup of this story and the characters. Love it. Keeps you intrigued and wanting to read the rest of the books. And then for sure, my number 1 is book 3. Book 3 is just so good. It was such the perfect finale of a book. There wasn't a part of it I didn't like. So I would say, even if you like the first book, like the second book, it's worth it. It's worth it to read it for the third book. That's how much I liked it. It was so stinking good. Ugh, I loved the third book. So that is my ranking of the All Souls series. I definitely recommend this series. It's a fun series. It's kind of indulgent. It is definitely not a light read. It's kind of complicated to get through, but I think you'll like it. I really do. Especially if you like things that we've reviewed in the past, like Outlander and Bridgerton. you'll like it for sure. So let me know down in the comments below what your ranking is if you have read this series. And also check out the show on AMC because it's really good. I love the show. But that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.